Okay, Zok Tehel Gemara. So yesterday we were looking for shot in the line in the Mishnah that says V'chulunu v'mekdosh. Where is it Negeya Chiddush that it's Negeya by Chulun and Mekdoshim? The last attempt the Gemara made was that we're speaking by V'lodus Kachim and the Vibalt, the Isser Kachim comes before the Isser Gid because as the animal gets formed, it first becomes usher with kachim, and only then does it become usher else gid hanosha. Really, there should be the svara of ein iser kalal iser. But zok to Gemara, vibalt isurei noig v'bnei noya. Vibalt Rebbe is going with the shita of Rabbi Yehuda in this case that the iser gid hanosha was relevant even before Klal Yisrael had Kabbalah Satira. That's a great primer. The Isser of Kachim did not exist before Kabbalah Satira. Therefore, the Isser Gid will be Chal on the Isser Kachim. That's what the Gemara remained with at the end of yesterday. And the Gemara had to say that our Mishnah is following Rabbi Yehuda Shita in reference to that the Isser Gid is Noig even by Bnei Noach, although in other ways our Mishnah is not going like Rabbi Yehuda, like our Gemara lists off. Our Mishnah says it's Noigei Abiyach Shoyimin, Ubiyach Shol, and Tosfos points out that our Mishnah says that it's Noig by a Shlil, and Rabbi Yehuda says that the Isser Gid Anosh is not Noig by a Shlil. So Rebbe is taking the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda only that it's how the Isser Gid was applied even to Bnei Noach, and it's for that reason that it's going to be doicha the Isser of Kachim. Correct the Gemara, I don't think that's enough of a reason to be doicha Kachim. So we're like 7 lines from the top. Amar Deshamis Leila Rabbi Yehuda B'Tmeya. I would understand that the Isser Gid can be doicha the Isser Behemet Tmeya, and would therefore say that a Gid will be usher even on a Behemet Tmeya. Why? The Isser Lav, because the Isser for eating a Behemet Tmeya is a regular Lav. But Kachim, the Isser Karis, Kachim is a much more Chomer than Isser. Mishamas Lei. Who says that Rabbi Yehuda Shita that holds that the Isser Gid Anosha was noig even by Bnei Noach? Who said that's enough of a chaymer to even be chal on an Isser Kachim that has an Isser Karis? So we're stuck because if that's what the Mishnah means by Mekdoshim, I have a big question. That's justified because the Isser Gid is only an Isser Lav. The Isser Kachim is an Isser Karis. The fact that the Isser Gid was relevant even when they were Bnei Noach, that shouldn't be enough of a reason. That shouldn't be enough of a reason. And therefore, we're stuck. We're back to the drawing board. Where is the Mishnah a Chiddush that it's Negeya B'Mekdoshim? Zog to Gemara Elahacha B'Miva Keres Eskina. You know what we're talking about? We're talking about a Bechor that's in its mother's stomach. Now, normally by Kachim, we're going to say that as it forms inside, it's Kachim, but Bechor is different. The Berechem Kadosh. The Bechor only becomes Kedusha once it's Petarechem during the childbirth or after the childbirth. So therefore, the Isser Gid preceded the Isser of Bechor, and that's the narrow case in which our Mishnah is telling us the Chiddush that here Gid will be, Isser Gid will be Chal on the Isser Hektish, because in fact it's not Chal on the Isser Hektish, it's Chal before the Isser Hektish comes to play. Let's see Rashi. Elahacha b'miva keres askinan, the loy kadosh vlad, elabarechem b'yitziosai. When does the vlad become kodesh, the bechar, as it's petarechem? Vashmi'inan tanadidan, the afagav, the ein gid noig, b'shar mukdashim. Even though the Isser Gid will not be negated by other hektish, because we said in Yisr Chalal Isser, the Isser Mekdoshim Kodem, the Isser of hektish comes first. To the Amrit, like we said a moment ago, the Yitziras Uber Kodemes, and therefore Bestu Loy Osi Isser Gid V'Chayil, Apilochi, nevertheless, Yesh Mukdoshim Shagid Noig Ben. There are a select types of hektish where the Isser Gid will be relevant to, Kegoyin Bechor, like a Bechor. Because Meimonivsha, Inoig Bishalil, if the Isser Gid is Noig Bishalil, then Isser Gid is considered the Surah Taka. And even if you have a Yehuda, the Einoig Bishalil, then it starts upon birth and so either the Isser Gid came first, or it at least came simultaneously with the Isser Kachim, and therefore the Isser Gid will be Chal. That's one option that could be what our mission is talking about. Zok to Gemara, we have another option. The base changes it from Vlados Kachim to Bivlados Kachim. We're speaking about Vlados Kachim, which means a behema that was pregnant, but have Yosy and Kadoshim. And our Mishnah holds that the Vlad doesn't become Kodesh b'yitzirasai b'rechamimoy. Rather, they hold that the Vlados Kachim only gets its Kedusha upon birth. And once again, the Isser Gid will precede, or at least come simultaneously with the Isser of Kachim. Let's hear Rashi, the boy said, but Vlados Kachim, Hashem in Tana. What's the Chiddush of our Tana in this option? The Loikachi b'me'ima. The Chiddush Gufa is that the Isser of Kachim does not happen as the Vlad is being formed, Elav Yosan b'yitziyasan. Rather, when the animal is going to be born, the Gemara refers to it as Behavyosan. We'll see in a moment why. But just for our purposes, Pilchach Isser Gid Noig B'Kulam. Isser Gid will be Noig by any animal that's born to an animal that's hektish. Mishum the Iyukad, because the Isser Gid precedes the Isser of Kachim. The Noig B'Shalil, because the Isser Gid is Noig even on a fetus, and therefore V'Stulo Paka, and the Isser Gid will not go off, even though the Isser Kachim comes later. The Laitema b'Me'iman Kedoshim. Don't say that a fetus of a Kachim animal becomes Kodesh in its mother's uterus as it's being formed, and then the Isser Mokdoshim Kodem, and then we have the problem that the Isser of Hektish came first. The Amran, the Nefel Sholi Nishkashu Evar Begidin, like we said earlier by the Nefel, the Surah see Isser Gid V'Chayil, and therefore the Isser Gid won't be Chayil. Rather, say that the fetus only takes on its Kedusha once it's born. Now Rashi is just dealing with why does the Gemara refer to when the behemoth is born as Baviyotza? So Rashi Lochi Nachat Baviyotza Mishum Lishnu the Kradi Alfina Minei Kedushas blood of Kachim. It's because that's how the pasuk expresses the kedusha of the vlad of Kachim. The Perek Beis the Bechayis, it says Ra Kodeshecha Elu Temures Asher Yiu Lecha Elu Havlados. So vlados are referred to as Yiu Lecha.
Why do we have to come out with a specific case? Like, why can't it be regular Kachim?
Because we said by regular Kachim, the Isser Gid will not be Chal. Or you wonder what's going to be in a regular case where I took an animal and I said I raised oil?
Yeah.
Because the Gemara asked, what's the Kiddush? Why in the world would Gid not be Chal? Gid Anasha was there already. The Isser Gid Anasha was there already because you added Kachim to it. Why should the Isser Gid fall away? So that's not a Kiddush.
It's the same thing with all these cases.
No, in these cases, first let's say the last case we would. Vlados Kachim. The Kiddush of the Mishnah is that the Vlados Kachim do not become Kodesh until they're born. So it's a Kiddush in Hilchos Vlados Kachim. That when does the Vlad Kachim become Kodesh? When it's born. When does the Bechor become Kodesh? When it's born. So therefore, it's an exception to the rule of Ein Yisrael Halal Isser. So that's the Kiddush that is telling us. But there's no Kiddush to tell us that an animal becomes Kodesh when you're Makdish it. Of course, it wouldn't become Kodesh before that. Okay, so now we've limited the whole Kiddush of the Mishnah, Bein Bechul and Bein B'Muktoshim, to two very specific cases. Either blood is Kochim, and the Kiddush of the Mishnah is Kedushasan Bavyasan, or by a Bechor, and it's teaching us that the Bechor, it becomes Kodesh only when it's born, and the Gid is a limited case where it's Chal before. Okay, Gewaltig. Zog the Gemara weiter. Amar Abkiba Yosef. Lo yishanu ela kochim hadachol. This that we say, that there's an Isser Gid on kochim, that's only kochim that you can eat. So a carbon shlamim, a carbon katos, those are eaten, so the person, the kohen or the Yisrael eating it, is forbidden to eat the Gid Anasha in the carbon. But a carbon oil, for instance, ain't Isser Gid noig behen, meaning you could place the Gid Anasha on the Mizbeach to burn. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Echad Kochim an Echolin, the Echad Kochim she'ein Echolin, Isser Gid noig behen. Amar Apapa v'loy pligi. But these two members are not arguing, because Kan lahal kaisai, the member that says that there is an Isser Gid noig by Kochim is legabe if it's eaten, and therefore one would get malchus for it. Kan lahaloisai. The member that says it's not noig by Gid is referring to a carbon oila where you're being makbid on the mizbech. So there's no machlokes here. Both members agree that a human may not eat the Gid of a carbon, but the mizbeach may eat the Gid of a carbon. Ika de Amri, but there's another approach. Amar Papa v'loy pligi, kan l'chaltoi, the kan l'halois. We're speaking only by kochim. The question is, are you mechuyev to take the Gid out of the animal before you place the carbon oila on the mizbeach? So kan l'chaltoi. When the member says, when the Pechibah Yosef is quoted as saying that it's not relevant by kochim she'ein echolin, that's to tell you that if you cut it out, you're not allowed to put it on the mizbeach. But the kan la'loisei, if you didn't cut it out and it's part of the yerech of the animal, you could place it on the mizbeach as it is. So again, if you cut it out, you're not mechuyev to cut it out. But if you cut it out already, you can't put it by itself on the mizbeach. But if you didn't cut it out and it's part of the yerech, you could still place it on the mizbeach. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar lehaloisoi pligi. No, he learns there's actually a machlokes. The machlokes is, are you allowed to put it on the mizbeach with the Gid in it, or must you cut it out? The Tanya we learned. So now we're going to introduce a machlokes whether or not you're mechuyev to take the Gid Hanasha out of the leg, or if you're allowed to place the leg on the mizbeach, even though the Gid Hanasha is still inside. The Tanya we learned in a brayta. The Hikter Kohen as a Kohen HaMizbeach. That's what the Torah says is done by a carbon oila. The Rabbi Shat Tomais, Vagidin, Vakarnayim, Vatlapim. Not only do you put the meat on the mizbeach, you put the bones and the sinews and the horns and the hooks, everything. Yachal afilu parashu. You would think even if these items were separated and already were cut off, they're put on by themselves on the mizbeach. The only part of the carbon that gets placed on the mizbeach is basar adam. If basar adam, you might think that you're mechuyev to cut these parts off. And exclusively only put basar on the mizbeach. Talmud Leimar, The other pasuk of the Hikter HaKoyin, it's a Koil HaMizbecha, so we have a steer. Do you put everything on? Only the basar and dam. Okay, so Michul Barin, if they're still connected, you didn't cut them off, these parts, yeah, you could put it, the whole Aver on the Mizbeach, even though it includes those pieces. However, Perishu, if you happen to have cut them off before you place the Aver on the Mizbeach, then Afilu Baroisha Mizbeach Yerdu. Even if you cut it off on the Mizbeach, and they're on the Mizbeach, take the Gidin, take the Tlafim, take the bones off. Zog to Gemara. So that tells us a very good halacha that we have here a machlokes. I mean, what we quoted is only one half of the machlokes, who holds that while they're connected, you can put them on the mizbeach, but when they're cut off, you're not allowed to put them on the mizbeach. Uman Tana, the Shamas Lay, the Amar Pershu Yardu. Who is the Tana who holds that if the Giranasho was separated from the Yerach, it's not allowed to be placed on the fire? Rebbe, it's Rebbe. The Tanya of a Higdar HaKoyin is a koil. The rabbis, Vatzamois, Vagidin, Vakenayim, Vatlopim, Vafilu Parshu, even if they were cut off, you still couldn't put them, you still may put them on the Mizbech. I Vamani Mekayim Vasisa Lesecha Basar Vatam, Vipoikin. That's if they're already partially consumed by the fire and they pop off the fire. There, you'll still place back on the Mizbeach to burn, but these extras, Kanayim, Plofim, Matzobis, and Gidin, if they pop off the Mizbeach because they're on fire and they're partially burnt, you don't put them back. Okay, so Ikule Bunker at the master, the master, Ikule Gidin Vatzobis. That is the sheet of the Tanakam. But Rabbi Omer, who we're focusing on, says, which is Reba. Which is a meal. Okay, so Yalu, if it's still connected, then you put it on the Mizbeach. If they were separated, then even if you're on top of the Mizbeach, you don't put it on the Mizbeach. Now we have over here a little machlok, because Rabbi says, and the Rabbana say dafka we're talking about a kula that you don't put back. So what is this discussion about? Rabbanan have a perfect to say that only if it's even if it's cut off, you put it back on. You don't need a person to tell us that while it's connected as one piece, you put it on. You only need a person to tell you that even if it was cut off, you could put it on. Why? Because I don't need a person to tell you you don't take any pieces. Because I know that already, media to have a Rosh Hashanah. It says by the other way, you put the Rosh on, complete. The Rosh is full of bones. Yet you see you put it in. So you see clearly that any ticket bones go around the Mizbeach as part of the rest of the animal. The whole finish is that even if it's partial, even if a bone is part of the carbon, and it's the bone by itself, for that I need a pasuk that says you put it on the Mizbeach. So creates or the partial. For Rebbe says, no, Mechubarin da Torah. Mechubarin da Torah, I agree, I don't need any pasuk for. Because remember, the Rabbanim are only talking about a Torah. The Rabbanim are not talking about the Giranasha. Talking about other parts of the animal that are not meat, but are still better. So Zokrabi Mechubarin da Torah, turning on to a Tzaddik of base. I don't need a pasuk to tell me that Mechubarin da Torah goes on the Mizbeach. So there he agrees, of course, with the Rabbanan. But I do need a pasuk to tell you that the Gid Hanosha, even if it's Mechubar, it gets put on the Mizbeach. See, the Rabbanan is learning the whole pasuk that's only talking about Mili de Torah. So therefore, he says even Parashu, you put it on the Mizbeach by Mili de Torah. But Rebbe, who's learning the Chiddush and Lagabi Gir Anosha, needs the pasuk to tell you that a Gir Anosha, if it's mechuber, you can put it on the Mizbeach. But if it's not mechuber, you don't have any extra lima to teach us that it would be put on the Mizbeach. According to the Rabbanan, you don't have any limit at all that a Gir Anosha can be placed on the Mizbeach. Therefore, the Rabbanan would hold, even if the Gir Anosha was connected to the Yerach, you would have to remove it. So here's our machlokes. Rebbe old, if the Gir Anosha is mechuber, lahaloita, you could put it on, and the Rabbanan hold, if the Gir Anosha is mechuber, even lahaloita, you cannot put it on. You must cut it out. So Gemara keeps according to Rebbe to be matter legit anosha b'mechuber that you can put it on. V'Rabbanan hold no. Even if it's mechuber, you cannot put the git anosha on the mizbeach because mimashka Yisrael. The pasuk says, "What do you put on the mizbeach? Something that's the mashka Yisrael." The pasuk in Yecheskel says, "V'seh akas minatoin minamasayim mimashka Yisrael." And we learned that the only thing you'd ever put on the Mizbeach is something that a Yisrael is allowed to eat. A Yisrael is not allowed to eat a Gidanash. Minamutal Yisrael. So therefore the Rabban said, no way. You always must extract the Gidanasha from a carbon oil even before you put it on the Mizbeach. For Rebbe, so why does Rebbe, how could Rebbe say that you could put the Gidanasha on the Mizbeach? It's not Mashka Yisrael. Rebbe needed to have a Chayla V'dam. Guess what? A person's not allowed to eat chayla, person's not allowed to eat dam, that's what you put on the mizbech. Rabbanon, that's not a raya. Mitzvahs on the shiny. The Torah says specifically that's the main part of the carbon. So there the Torah is instructing you to put it on. But Gir Anosha, nowhere is the Torah instructing you to put it on the mizbeach, so you wouldn't be able to put it on the mizbeach. So that's a machlokes between Rabbi and the Rabbanon, whether the Gir Anosha has to be cut out of the yerach before it's placed on the mizbeach. Amar Funa, Gir Anosha shel oila, the Gir Anosha of an oila, chol soy v'tapua. You don't put it down on the floor. It's up on the mizbeach, and you know where you put it? On the tapua. In the center of the mizbeach, there's a big sphere handle of ash. You throw it, put it in there. You're not knocking it on the flame. You just throw it to the tapua, which gets disposed of. Amar Krista, you're the author of this sheet that's part of the tapua. Mix it. That says in the Torah that the Mizbeach may not eat to get a nasha. What's your makar that you don't put the Ganasha on the Mizbeach to burn like the rest of the Rafuna, you know where Rafuna got it from? Mimashki Yisrael, Minamitali Yisrael. From the person we quoted earlier, that the only part of a hema that you can be massive are what a person is allowed to eat. Maybe so fake the Gemara. Git Anasha shall shlomim. What do you do to get a nasha of the shlomim, which is normally of what would be eaten, usually by the kohen, it's a chaz of a sheikh, or even if it's eaten by the Yisrael, you don't eat that part. It's also to eat. They threw it into the amo. I can imagine when the whole Azara backs up and is flooding, and they call the plumber, he'll check the drain, and they'll say, "What's big drain here?" It broke the whole drain. Because they just threw it
all unclear. Is there something wrong?
It's not clear?
No.
Okay, let me try changing microphones.
Now it's better, maybe. I don't know.
It's better now?
A little bit, yeah.
It might have been a bad internet connection for me. So if it's from a shlomim or a kata, you just throw it in to the ama and let it drain out, but you don't eat it. Vishal oila, but the giranush of an oila, malayu, you bring it up onto the mizbeach. So you see, you do put it on the mizbeach. Zaktabar my love, my layu umaktiroi. If you're bringing it up to the mizbeach, what are you doing with it up there? You're obviously going to be maktir it. It's not mashki Yisrael. My layu v'cholta. You take it up to the mizbeach in the era. You do the nikur. You take the giranosha out on top of the mizbeach, and you put it on the tapuach. Right, the Gemara. Lama malay. If you're going to take it out anyway, why bring it up? Take it out already down there and take up the clean yara to put straight onto the fire. Would you be making a butchered piece of meat to a prince? So when you bring the leg up, it should be complete and pristine. Up on top, you could already carve it out. But if you carve it out downstairs, the whole leg won't look nice when it's presented. Tanya Kavasei de Rafuna. We have a brisa that supports Rafuna Shita that you don't put the Giranasha on the Mizbeach because it says Giranasha shall shlomim mechadoy la'ama shall oila chol to the tapur. Tanan also tapur chaya be'emtza Mizbeach. There's a big pile of ash in the center of the Mizbeach. Ha'amim haya alav kishalosh me'ois kur. Sometimes it grew so big it was like 300 kur, which is a massive amount of volume, an unrealistically massive amount of volume. Amarava guzma. It doesn't literally mean that it was so big. It's just saying 300 kur to exaggerate. It just means that it was a huge amount, not necessarily actually 300 kur. Another guzma was histu as a tamid the koshal zav. It makes it easier to skin an animal if it drinks water right before it's slaughtered. So the carbon tamid, they used to give it to drink water before it was shechted, but they let it drink water out of a golden place. Again, amarava guzma. That's also guzma. It means they gave it to drink, but avada wasn't in a golden place. Amar Rabami said, Dibra Torah Loshan Avoy. Sometimes the Torah speaks with hyperbole and it says something that's a little bit over the top. Nevi'im Loshan Avoy, Dibra Nevi'im Loshan Avoy, you find the same by Nevi'im, and Dibra Chacham Loshan Avoy, you find that the Tanoim also spoke that way. Dibra Chacham Loshan Avoy, Hadamorin, what we just said, that they gave the Talmud to drink in a golden cup, and there was 300 kur of ash on the tepuach. That's where you see the hyperbole there. Where do you see Dibra Torah Lashon Avoy? Because the Torah says, we just laid it, Arim Gedolos Ubethuros Bashamayim. These are big fortified cities up to the sky. That's not real. It means it was very fortified. Then it's hyperbole, and that's the way the Torah speaks. And you find the same thing by Dibra Nevorim Lashon Avoy. It says about Tibaka Ha'aretz L'Koilam. The Navi describes a scene by Adonio Hamelech where Vayalu Kolam Acharov, Va'am Mechalilim B'chalilim, they're blowing flutes with Smechim Simcha Gedoyla, V'tibaka Ha'aretz L'Koilam. The earth split from their noise, from their reveling. But it didn't split. Again, it's a figure of speech. And that's how we find the Navi speaks. There's three examples of where the Chachamim spoke with hyperbole. Anyway, Hapuach, Gefen, Uparoiches. What is conspicuously missing? The Kiton Shalzov with which they gave the Karbatama to drink. Because Rabbi Yitzchak by the Nachmani or Shmuel hold that was not hyperbole. That was real. They actually did use a golden kois to give the carbon tamid to drink water. So what are these three things? Which is the ash. There was actually a golden vine, a golden grapevine that was formulated that hung over the doorway of the paroiches. There were posts that there was a vine made out of gold, grapevine made out of gold that they draped over it. The Chol show you Misnadav Gargir or Eshkoil, if somebody wanted to donate a grape of gold or a whole cluster of gold, maybe the Toilaba would come and hang his gold over there. Amar Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok. So that was also Avoy. And the third hyperbole is no, that's not hyperbole. That was real. Hyperbole is Amar Belazar Rab Tzadok, my Sahaya V'nimnu aleh shalosh me'os kayanim lifnoisa. They once wanted to start harvesting that gold, and it took 300 kohanim to harvest that gold. That's hyperbole. It didn't really take so many kohanim. Where is there a hyperbole by the parashas? It's non Rab Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Mishum Rab Shimon Atam. The parashas, Ubiyah Tefach. It was a Tefach thick. V'al Shivim Ushnayim Nir Mereges. Now, a near is when you look at a weaving machine, there's the long threads that go across from the upper roller to the lower roller, and each string goes through a loop, and every second loop is raised and every second loop is lowered, and then they throw the weft thread in between. That's how they weave. So the near is each individual thread that goes through that loop. That loop is called the near. So there were 72 nirin, which is a lot of nirin, naregas, and each thread that went through each of those holes, there wasn't one thread like in a normal weaving process. Rather, kol nima v'nima esrim v'arba chutin. Each thread was actually spun of 24 different threads, and oracle arboim ba'ama. The parochos was 40 amas high. V'rochba esrim ba'ama, and it was 20 amos wide, which was the dimension of the Pesach of the Eichel. It was made with 820,000 threads is what it was made out of. That's one Rashi. The other Rashi is 820,000 girls worked on producing it. They could only make 2 in a year. And it would take 300 Kohanim to total it. So the hyperbole, it didn't really take 300 Kohanim. Where do you get the number 300? So the grain says it's a very simple question. If you have a parochos that's 20 amas by 40 amas, what's the perimeter? 120. That's 40 plus 40 plus 20 plus 20 is a total of 120 amas. Now, how many tefachim is in 120 amas? It's 120 times 5. 120 times 5 is 600. So the 600 tefachim linear the 600 linear tefachim in the perimeter of the parochos. If you hold something with 2 hands, you actually do tefachim. So if you have 600 linear tefachim, then it works out perfectly for 300 kohanim. Now, of course, it's still hyperbole because we didn't hold it so close together. But like it says, the reason why the number 300 was picked by the Gemara is because of that calculation. Now we're on to the next line of the Mishnah that tells us that the Isra Nasha is equally on the right kid as it is on the left kid. Our Mishnah will not be consistent with Rabbi Yehuda. Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Eino Noyeg Ela Ba'achas. The Gira Nasha only applies to one of them. Which one? Vadas Machras. The logic dictates Es Shel Yamin. So what does that mean? What did Rabbi Yehuda mean when he said Vadas Machras? Ibelu. Mifshit Pshita Lele Rabbi Yehuda. Does Rabbi Yehuda know for sure it means the Yamin? Umay Das Torah. So Vadas Machras, Das Torah tells us that if it's one, it's the right one. Or maybe Rabbi Yehuda is Sefuka Misafkale. Rabbi Yehuda is not sure. Umay Das Noita. So when Rabbi Yehuda said Vadas Machras, he meant that I think it's probably the right one. Not that the Torah says it's the right one. So at the end of the day, is Rabbi Yehuda sure that it's the right one? Or is he not actually sure? So we're now clearing Rabbi Yehuda's mindset. Was Rabbi Yehuda clear that it was the right one? Or was Rabbi Yehuda mistaken if it's the right or left? Let's see if we can bring a riot. It says that by the Korban Pesach, there are parts you don't eat. So Hatzamois, Vagidin, Vanoisar, Hatzamois, the Gidin and the Noisar, you're not going to eat them. So therefore, they become Noisar the morning of the first day of Pesach. You can't burn Noisar on Pesach, So you have to wait for the first Echmal. When do you burn this Noisar? Yisrafu L'Shisha Asar. Ba'avinamba. The Gemara had a problem. It says Gid. Hana Gidi Maya Viditai. What are these Gid? Igidni Brasser. If the Gidin have the status of meat, let's win. We eat them. Why leave them open? We eat them lesser. And if you're telling me they're edible and you could have eaten them, but you happen to have left them over and they became Noisar, well, then hide the Noisar. The Bryce already says, Noisar Yisrafu. What are Gid that you don't eat them, that you can't eat them? What is it referring to? Ella Gidei Tzafa. It's speaking about the Gidim of the day. So, Fektor Mamonish. Ilav Brasser they do, Lishtinu. If they're not meat, then you don't have to burn them at all. Just throw them in the garbage. The Yom Pista, so Pista said, Loi Nitrucha Ella Ligiradash. This is going according to Giradasha, while you would be Yehuda, the Amr ain't another Elabach. It's going according to Yehuda. The non makes perfect sense. If Yehuda is specific, this gid might be edible, it might not be edible. It's also to eat or not. Because you don't know if it's the right one or the wrong one. Be specific, you're not allowed to eat it. Be specific, you're going to have to burn it. Which is probably if Yehuda has a topic. You give it to Shlomo's book in Mesech how it makes sense why the Brasa lists off to get a Nasha as something that you're going to have to burn on the first day of the if you hold he knows it's the right one, so then what's the question there? This way, the one that's hefty, which is the last one, you should eat it. And the Yisura, and but why is there a need to burn specifically the git? I'm not making a Hanina, that's why you didn't know to show the right one. There's something. Maybe the case was is you don't know which is the right and which is the left. You have these two getting here, and you don't know which is which. So therefore, you don't have a choice. Either one might be a suffix here, therefore you can't eat it. And that's what it's referring to. But Rabbi Yehuda himself knows for sure that if you could identify the right gid, that's the one that does her. The left gid is mutter. Okay, let's stop here, and we'll be back tomorrow.
Shkoyach, shkoyach.
Go ahead, Mati.
How you feeling?
I got much stronger painkiller last night. I called two doctors. One doctor